How's it going, and welcome to episode 69 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. Of course, if you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And I'm once again joined by my co-host Kevin Hasting, who should be followed himself on the Twitter at HastingKevin. And we have baseball back, Kevin. Hopefully the break, you didn't do any major tinkering that I got wind that you might have been doing over the break. We didn't make any major changes to any of your teams, maybe add a Patrick Corbin for some reason, or put in too many guys on the IL into your teams. But how's it hanging over back in Hawaii?
No, it's great to have games back, and it's awesome out here in Hawaii. That's weird after all this time doing this on Saturday evenings, and now for me it's Saturday afternoon. But as far as games go, they're going off at the same time, and we have our Saturday evening games being played as we record, and trying to keep an eye on that and talk some baseball. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's good to have the games back on for sure. And obviously you're the lucky one that gets all the games early on in the morning, and then you're done. You have the evenings to yourself, if you will. And the games are going to happen.
The West Coast games get done at 7:30 o'clock here. It's amazing.
That is amazing. Speaking of the West Coast, thank you, Kevin, for that. We're going to represent, as we were talking off air beforehand, we're going to represent 3 different time zones here with our very special guest joining us, Alex Fast. He's here to help us break down the FAAB options we have for this weekend after the All-Star game has concluded. And if you're one of the few that are still not following him, make sure you are, and you can follow him on the Twitter at AlexFast8. You may know Alex from the On the Corner podcast right here on the Pitcher List Podcast Network, or his new Pitcher List show, the Nick and Alex Baseball Show. Maybe you know him as a defending Tout Wars champion or a multiple FSWA award winner, maybe an Emmy Award winner. Maybe you know him from his work on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball or MLB Network. Wherever Alex, he brings the good. So we're lucky to have him here with us today. So Alex, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing?
You can add was 25 minutes late too, because really that's all that matters. You know what I mean? All those accolades are nothing. You know what I mean?
New father. Oh, fine. I'll do new father. You got to give a reason for being late.
Yeah. New father is fine. Thank you guys. I'm sorry it took me so long to come on, but I'm excited to be here. You guys have arguably the best format of any of the podcasts in the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Definitely one of the tightest. Love that. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I asked Alex before the show, and if you listen to the show, I don't like to make assumptions. As long as you listen to one episode of the show, the format, you know what you're getting yourself into. Kevin and I do the same. We run the show back every single week the same way. No surprises, but maybe we'll get into a surprise or two later on in the show. So let's get right into it, though, guys. I thought as I started making these news and notes, I usually start writing these out on Thursday. I'm like, there's not that many notes. And then, bam, a whole bunch of stuff happened over the weekend. So we have a lot to talk about. Kevin, I'm going to start with you. Jazz Chisholm has a stress fracture in his back. He's going to be out another 6 weeks or more. Does this do enough to make him an easy drop this weekend if you've been stashing him in various leagues?
Yeah, I think so. Coming out of the All-Star break, we had 12 scoring periods left for fantasy baseball. And one of them was these 3 to 4 days this weekend. So now we're down to 11. The last one is another half week. So we're down to 10 and a half. And when you start talking about missing a minimum of 6 out of 10 and a half weeks, I think it's an easy drop for now. And then, of course, keep tabs. He could help the last 3-4 weeks of the season if he becomes available, and keep your eye on it and maybe pick him up a bit early, as we will talk about some other players as this show progresses. And I think in Miami, this solidifies playing time for Joey Wendell. And as we talked last week, it means, we're holding John Birdie to see what happens when he returns. A couple of guys there to keep your eye on in Birdie and Wendell, but I think it definitely means we're dropping Jazz for now.
Yeah, I'm with that too. It really depends on the format that you're going to be on. But Birdie's a great call. He was actually someone that I was going to bring up a little bit later, targeting for speed. But he's a sneaky dude and can often be a utility player for that team. So when there are opportunities that open up for him in that lineup, I think he's a good person to plug and play as he picks up some good value there.
All right, Alex, let's move into your bread and butter. Even if it's not starting pitching, it's still pitching. Trevor Rosenthal, he signs with the Giants after all this time, whether it be trying out for teams, showing off the goods, whatever it was that was holding him back. He finally made a decision. He goes with the Giants. Is there any chance that he finds regular time in the ninth inning in San Francisco?
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. I think Gabe Kapler kind of operates the way that kind of the Rays do, where it's always going to be the best man up for a particular situation. There have been 5 different relievers who have at least poached one save over in San Francisco. The most important thing is really going to be Trevor Rosenthal's velocity. He was hitting 100 last time he pitched. From what I've heard from the workouts that he's hosted, he's still hitting upper 90s, which is good. Obviously, if a team like the Giants are going to go ahead and pursue him, it means that he's healthy and it means that they're interested in what he's going to do. It's funny because every once in a while, a pitcher goes to the Giants, and I'm curious to see what they're going to do with pitch utilization, right? If they're going to amp up a changeup, for example, if they're going to start throwing a slider a little bit more. But Trevor Rosenthal is theoretically going to fit in the same way that Jake McGee is, right? Just 2 guys who are just going to throw 4-seamers all of the time. Rosenthal, of course, depending a little bit more on velocity. I don't know in terms of fantasy purposes, if you've got like a daily waiver, then if Camilo Doval has gotten back-to-back saves or has pitched back-to-back days, and Rosenthal is healthy, he could be a good opportunity for kind of like a good vulture save. But other than that, I would probably leave him on the wire until we at least get a better idea of how Kapler's going to utilize him at the beginning.
Kevin, you haven't actually held on to Rosenthal any of the places, except for in your draft and holds that you don't have a choice. But he's not available. He won't be available this weekend as he hasn't made his debut for the Giants this weekend. But are you excited to actually possibly be able to actually utilize him in those draft and holds?
In draft and holds, sure. I hope he ends up taking the job and running with it. But other than that, it's a wait and see. Yeah, I agree with Alex that Doval's the guy. And unless we see things start to change, then we know what Rosenthal can do when healthy. But I'm not convinced he's healthy. Otherwise, he would have signed before now.
That's probably fair. All right, Kevin, let's go over to Tampa Bay, who, with the Rays signing Roman Quinn to a major league contract after he became available. Can you see the Rays actually utilizing Quinn enough to make him valuable enough on fantasy teams, specifically because they signed him to a major league deal?
I hope, Adam, that all of Kansas City blames you. That Brady Singer had a no-hitter going into the 6th inning this evening, and Roman Quinn bunted for a hit in the 6th inning with a no-hitter going. No, I don't care about.
Of course he did.
A hit with a no-hitter going. But then he also hit a 2-run triple in the 7th. So the game that was a 3-0 no-hitter going is now tied 3-3 as we are recording. And it's all your fault. All of Kansas City knows that. But no, he just doesn't hit enough, unfortunately. And it's shocking, right, that the Rays have him and Brett Phillips in the starting lineup against the Royals today. Both of them hitting 160-something or lower. You would think the Rays, of all teams, it's going to be Brett Phillips against righties and Roman Quinn versus lefties. And they were both in the lineup today. But I just don't see him with his strong side of the platoon, even though he's a switch hitter. He's much better versus lefties. I don't see any fantasy value here.
Yeah, I agree. I think all you really need to know about Roman Quinn is exactly on the Baseball Savant page, right? Max exit velocity at 25th percentile, but the sprint speed at 97th percentile. To me, this kind of reeks of a guy that they're going to use late innings if they're down to be able to get G-Man Choi out of the game, get like Francisco Mejia out of the game to use in a pinch run situation. Obviously, Fangraphs has him platooning right now. He is going against a righty today, as Kevin mentioned, hitting 9th, but I don't really see any fantasy value there whatsoever.
Yeah, it sounds like he'll be playing the same role he was in Philadelphia as that 4th or even 5th outfielder, needing a couple extra injuries to get any kind of somewhat regular playing time. And regular playing time in Tampa, we all know, is not usually in the cards for most players. All right, Alex, Dallas Keuchel, DFA'd. Again, this time by the Diamondbacks, of course. Is there any other spot that he could be picked up and find a way to be actually fantasy relevant for the last 10 scoring periods?
No, it's just been bad. It's been bad in Chicago. And then to have Arizona pick him up, who's clearly not in contention, probably not going to be in contention for another year or two. And then to have him pitch that poorly again, maybe there's a chance that he gets a spot in some other rotation right before the trade deadline comes to a close, after Luis Castillo gets moved, after Frankie Montas gets moved, and an organization doesn't want to go to the well too much with their young pitchers, maybe. But I don't see him having I don't see him moving to a team and switching something up a little bit and all of a sudden becoming a pertinent pitcher. I was pissed when the Diamondbacks acquired him, because I know that Dan Straley was doing relatively well inside of the Diamondback system. And then they signed Dallas Keuchel. They call him up right away because I think it was to a minor league contract, and then get some innings out of him. Now he's gone. I wouldn't be surprised if he's like, I don't think he's going to retire mid-season, but I don't know. I don't see any fantasy relevance. I don't want to say forever, but forever, really.
I think I could see him, you alluded to it, he could get signed by a team that has a lot of young pitchers. They want to manage their innings, and they want to have him come in and just eat innings away so they can make it a little bit more manageable for those young guys, like how Seattle sent down George Kirby, and there's other guys that they're trying to make sure they don't hit those innings limits, if you will, whether they're fictional or real or what have you. He could be that guy, not for a contender. And yeah. I agree with you that he's not somebody I will be looking at, but I don't see him retiring midseason, as you mentioned. I could see him getting picked up. It's league minimum. He's still getting paid elsewhere, so it's not like it's a whole lot of a coin coming out of anybody else's bank account.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Kevin, speaking of Seattle, Mitch Haniger, he started his rehab assignment, and Kyle Lewis came back to Seattle. So how long does Lewis stick around before getting injured again is question number one. And then what impact does this pair, when they both return to the lineup, have on the Seattle lineup as a whole?
Yeah, Haniger might be a little further away than we realize. Last night was his first game of his rehab assignment, and they only gave him 2 at-bats as a designated hitter. Hopefully there was no issues involved in that game. I haven't seen anything, but you would think he's the DH, he'd play the game. He did not, and so it'll be a while before then. Of course, we're going to need him to see him play the outfield before he comes up to Seattle. So it may be a little longer than we think. I think the earliest he can come back is next weekend, and I doubt that happens. As far as Kyle Lewis, man, this guy is just crushing baseballs when he's healthy, whether it be AAA, whether it be the couple of games he's played in Seattle here and there, crushing baseballs. And so I'm really hoping these concussion issues are done and over with, and we see him for a while, and we see what we saw in 2020 when he was Rookie of the Year, as far as the impact it has on Seattle lineup. If both of them do come back healthy in a couple of weeks, it probably means we don't see Dylan Moore much anymore. Ty France is healthy now too. I know we're talking infield, but this shoves all of the infield and outfield utility guys to the infield, with Carlos Santana now holding down the first base / DH position in the lineup every day at one or the other, and hit another home run today, as is what happens with guys once the Kansas City Royals trade them. We saw that with Jorge Soler last season. We can't predict injuries, so I'm really hoping Lewis does stick around. I do have him in a lot of draft and holds and on a couple of dynasty teams, so that definitely I'm being a little selfish there. But he's a fun guy to watch play baseball, and we're always hoping for guys to stay healthy regardless. But yeah, as far as the impact on Seattle's lineup, I think it ends up affecting the infield more so. We know Ty France is going to be in the lineup. It's going to move guys like Dylan Moore, who in 5x5 leagues with average wasn't fantasy relevant, but in OBP leagues, he was just fine to get those stolen bases. In points leagues, depending on how you score your leagues, and if you get negative for strikeouts, he might have been okay. And I think that's going to go away.
Yeah, I think It's obviously scary because of what he's been through so far this year, but you have to just go ahead and take the risk. There's so much theoretical upside there. I know at the moment he's batting a little bit lower in the lineup for the Mariners too, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that creep up a little bit. I know Julio Rodriguez still just dealing with a little bit of wrist soreness, but I still see him moving up to like 5th or 6th at least in that lineup moving forward. And there's just so much upside that you're rarely going to be able to pick up in the second half of the season. You know what I mean? So much upside that's been proven, right? There are going to be guys that turn it around in the second half that have better seasons than we were anticipating. But this is a guy that has the proven upside that's there. As Kevin mentioned, really just knocking the heck out of the ball in the minor leagues. I think he was slashing like he had a 1.149 OPS, like a 1.15 OPS in the minor leagues over about 58 plate appearances. So he's ready. You know what I mean? It's not like he was going down there and struggling and swinging and missing. He did exactly what you wanted to see at the minor league level. I think it's going to be able to translate. You just have to take the risk there that he's going to be able to stay healthy for back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, Kevin, as you mentioned, Carlos Santana hit a home run, so that's fun. Another home run that happened today was Matt Carpenter added his 14th of the year.
I thought we might make it through the show without bringing that up.
I was hoping since it was against the Orioles, we weren't going to bring it up, but yeah.
I was trying to find the first possible good way to sneak in that in there. I'm like, I don't see a natural way of getting it in here throughout the whole show. The first chance I got, I'll throw it in there.
No, so a couple of weeks ago, I picked him up everywhere. And last week, the week prior to the All-Star break was amazing. And had him in the lineup again in all the lineups where I picked him up again this week. And the doubleheader on Thursday evening, he was 0 for 9. Mm-hmm. And then didn't play on Friday. And I was like, here's the big drop off, right? Nope. He came through today.
He sure did. He's back.
All right. We'll move on from that just so it doesn't stick in Alex a little bit too longer. All right, Alex, we'll move to Cincinnati. Tyler Mahle, he's set to return for the Reds rotation on Sunday. Question though with him, will he pitch enough between now and the trade deadline to garner enough interest or any interest to send him out of Cincinnati? And also keeping in mind that he does have one more year of arbitration left before becoming a free agent. I know everybody's talking about Luis Castillo. Mahle is still on the block as well. What do you think?
Mahle makes a lot of sense to trade, not just because of what you just said with that arbitration year, but because he's 27 years old. He's been able to throw 180 innings before. Yeah, he has dealt with some injury stuff in the past, but there's a lot of upside there. And the thing that is funny to me is no matter where he goes, because you got to figure he goes to a contender, right? So then no matter where he goes is a park upgrade. Because the only park downgrade for him is Colorado, right? That's like literally the only park downgrade that he could theoretically get in Colorado. And obviously they're not going to trade for him because why would they? This is a guy that's historically been much better away from Cincinnati, right? It's happening again this year where he's got a 3.83 ERA away over 40 innings. The WOBA goes from 352 at home to 248 while away. And if you want to talk about a larger sample size, at home, a career 507 ERA with a 349 WOBA, and away a 374 ERA with a 296 WOBA. There should be teams that are theoretically foaming at the mouth from him while they're dealing with that shoulder strain this year, which could, if I'm a GM, I'm saying, I don't know if I want to give you my best prospects. He's got some injuries. He's got a shoulder strain, but really they're thinking I would probably love to get this guy. The K's haven't necessarily been there for him this year, as we've seen in the past 2 years, but the swinging strike rate is just as good. The whip I wouldn't be as concerned about because I think getting him in a better stadium with a better defense behind him, probably going to lower that BABIP a little bit lower than the career norm. So, yeah, if I'm a team, I'm really interested in Tyler Mahle. Could be the third or fourth best available starting pitcher at the deadline, in my opinion.
It's like he's what John Gray was for years. And we're seeing that out of John Gray now. It took him a little adjustment period, but now we're seeing an amazing John Gray that we thought we would. And that's now what we're hoping for Mahle.
Yep. Yeah, you say like a great comp.
He could go to Colorado and keep those splits. I don't know, man. I don't even think that is the actual. I think that's still an upgrade based on everything you talked about with those splits he's seeing in Cincinnati for his career. I'd almost be okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be I would be surprising. I'm trying to think of what the best like landing spot for him theoretically could be of any of the contenders. Like maybe Tampa would be a lot of fun for him. San Francisco is always going to be a part of the conversation. I don't think Atlanta would be as good because I think that ballpark can still be dangerous for him. But either way, I would be very surprised if come August 3rd, we saw him in a Cincinnati Reds jersey.
Yeah, that's probably fair. All right, we'll stay in Cincinnati then, Kevin. We'll hit to the hitting side. Harrison Bader, he's starting a rehab assignment for the Reds. Quick question, though, is he even worth stashing now for that speed bump that we saw earlier on the season from him?
No, and I think he meant red birds, not Reds. But no, even prior to today's news, when I saw your question and I went digging a little bit, and I couldn't remember what his injury was, and plantar fasciitis. I'm like, no, this is a speed guy. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And then I see today's news that last night he was removed from, or no, not removed from the rehab game, but after the rehab game, he was feeling fine, but not great. And now he's not going to play on Saturday. And I'm like, no, this is a speed guy with a foot injury, and I'm out. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, a speed guy with a foot injury who has to play center field. Yeah. Like I just don't know if. You never know. Remember when Acuna, we were like, what's going to happen with those stolen bases? And then he returned and he flipped us all the bird and stole like 30 bases in 20 games. We're like, oh, okay. I would imagine that they wouldn't want him sprinting all over the field. It's also important to remember that Harrison Bader never batted higher than 6th this season. Like he's a 7th, 8th, 9th guy for them overall. Like if the choice is between him and center or him DHing, you probably put him in center. So yeah, I don't know if those stolen bases are immediately going to jump back. Because like you said too, plantar fasciitis is no joke. Like that's not a fun injury. I remember it really plagued Albert Pujols. Granted, Albert Pujols is like Harrison Bader is 16 Albert Pujolses, but still like that's a tough injury to overcome.
Yeah, and you bring up Ronald Acuna Jr. and the first thing that popped in my head is, we're talking about what Adrian Peterson did in football is what Ronald Acuna Jr. is doing in baseball. That's not what we're like judging anybody by.
Yeah.
All right. This is apparently Redbird Hour, and we'll stick with Cincinnati, Alex, where their catcher, Tyler Stevenson, he goes on the IL again. He's fractured, this time fracturing his clavicle. Also, no joke. On the flip side, staying with catcher, Yasmani Grandal, he returned from the IL for the White Sox. Is this an even swap for you if Grandal happens to be available for those who dropped him due to, 1, his poor play, and 2, his being on the IL? He's readily rostered across most NFBC platforms, 100% in the main event, 96% rostered. So he's not available in a lot of those, but maybe in your shallower formats, he might have been dropped more readily. Is this an even swap for you, or are you looking elsewhere if you need a catcher help with Stevenson going down?
It's not an even swap solely because Stevenson was hitting 319, which is crazy, over 183 plate appearances. And obviously, as Yasmani Grandal was totally struggling this year. I was one of the people who dropped him. It's so difficult to say. I'm going to use Brandon Woodruff as an example here. Brandon Woodruff, obviously struggling at the beginning of the year. He hits the IL. It turns out he's got, I think it's called like Raynaud's syndrome. It begins with an R, but he can't feel his fingers. And as a result, he's not able to throw his breaking pitches. And then he gets some treatment for that. He comes back and he's been incredibly effective since his return and started to look a little bit more like the pitcher that we want to see. Yasmani Grandal dealing with lower back spasms. Definitely, that's not to compare injuries, but not as dire as not being able to feel the tips of your fingers, but still it's just as dire for a guy who's perpetually swinging the bat, even though for all intents and purposes, you drafted Yasmani Grandal not necessarily because of his ability to swing the bat, but because of his inability to swing the bat when he doesn't need to. I think he's worth a pickup with the assumption that, okay, it can't be that bad. He cannot have a 288 OBP, which would be far and away career worse for him. So you have to at least do it with some upside. But honestly, if it's a week and he's still doing what he was doing beforehand, then I'm just cutting bait. I will not do the, what's that called? What's that fallacy called where when you're losing, you just keep losing because you figure my luck's going to turn around at some point. It's a gambler's fallacy or something. And that's what Yasmani Grandal is. It's like a sunken cost thing where you're like, I'm looking at the numbers. There's no way it's this bad. He's got to turn it around. And maybe since he's returning from injury, that's true. But honestly, I'm giving it a real short leash.
I feel the same way probably about Max Muncy.
Yeah.
He's the same version of that in 2022. I know I've held him in a couple of places. way too long than I should have. But
Muncie keeps doing just enough every so often to keep us
right when you want to drop him.
And not only that, to keep me putting him in the starting lineup. I got him benched most places, but he keeps doing just enough that's like, all right, this is it. He's coming out of it, and put him in the lineup. But I agree completely with Grandal, Alex. I am in a single catcher OBP league. And so Grandal is typically amazing. And I don't like to pay for catchers in a single catcher league, but I did pay for Grandal. We have unlimited IL, but I'm giving him 1 week. Like you said, I'm giving it 1 week. And if I have to count him against my roster, then I'm dropping him if he doesn't turn it around right away.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, Kevin, we got another trade this week. They're going to trickle in all the way up until the end of the month. This time it is Daniel Vogelbach being traded from Pittsburgh to the New York Mets. Does he actually find playing time with the Mets? And on the flip side, who's taking his at-bats in Pittsburgh?
We have 10 days to go before the trade deadline, and there's all kinds of things that we'll hear about might happen and things that actually will happen. And of course, we don't even get to bring names like Juan Soto up very much on this podcast, but some of this seems real. Like usually when we start seeing all of these types of trade scenarios floating around on Twitters, man, all these fans just got to stop. But something might be happening with Juan Soto. That's a side note because the Mets are involved. As of right now, I think Dan Vogelbach is the designated hitter versus right-handed pitching for the Mets. And in today's day and age, when more and more teams are playing matchups and platooning, a strong side of a platoon is not the drawback that it was not very long ago for our fantasy starting lineups. So if he's on the strong side of platoon, I'll throw him in there. And if Dan Vogelbach is going to be the designated hitter for a potent offense on the strong side of a platoon, which as of right now, I believe he is, although that could drastically change in the next 10 days. As of right now, this is something I'm interested in for sure.
Yeah, the news kind of stunk for me because that's where I really thought Trey Mancini was going to go. And this to me pretty much says that Trey Mancini is not going to be New York Met. Vogelbach just barrels the hell out of the ball, and he is going to a much better stadium for home runs in New York. He's also just going to be in a hell of a lineup, so he could be like a kind of sneaky pick. I kind of love guys like him because he's not a name, you know what I mean? Like maybe in the fantasy community we're aware of the power that he has, but like overall Daniel Vogelbach isn't a person that like we're spending a lot of time analyzing in the off season, you know what I mean? He was a Pirate, so he comes with that like losing team bias. But I don't know, now that he's kind of buried in that Mets lineup, which is really damn good from really 1 through 8, that's a really fun play to have. The platoon could theoretically be frustrating. JD Davis is going to get a good amount of time there. But if we notice that they're going to face a significant amount of righties that week, yeah, man, that's a fun ad.
He won't be leading off like he was for the Pirates, but who knows? All right.
I just want to see him in that jumpsuit in New York that we're seeing all over Twitter when he was still in Milwaukee.
Sure.
I want to see that in New York.
Yeah, sure.
That'll go over real well. All right, Alex, let's move up to Boston, who's now going to be without Rafael Devers, who hits the IL himself. Is there a fantasy relevant replacement in Boston worth watching for this week?
Nah. I really wish I could say like maybe. I was looking at Bobby Dahlbeck and just hoping that poking it with a stick and saying, come on, it's some more home runs, please. It's some more home runs. Like maybe take a look at like Franchi Cordero, but no, he hasn't even been doing what I hoped he would do his entire career, which is hit home runs. I don't know, man. Really, if you're looking for something fun to watch with the Red Sox, join me in watching if the Orioles are going to have a better record than them at any point in the next week, because that to me is really the most fun thing to watch. But that lineup is really struggling right now. All the people who would be pertinent are theoretically already added. Maybe if you're in a shallow league, Christian Vasquez could be a good opportunity. He's going to be hitting second for quite some time now, and he's actually slashing very well over the course of the year. He's got a 112 WRC plus. He's got a 332 WOBA. You got a chance maybe at some home runs, but you definitely have a chance at some runs and ribbies. So I guess Christian Vasquez?
Yeah, Jeter down started at third base for the Red Sox. As we're recording this on Saturday. As a Sox fan, I always wish we could have seen Bogarts move over to third base for enough games to gain eligibility there. I know he's against that, but I know that his defense would say otherwise for most fans. It would make a lot more sense for his long-term contract status as well.
Let me ask you, did you want to send Duran down immediately after that game last night?
How do you not see? Fenway doesn't have that bad of lighting. I understand there's the triangle. I get the field is wonky in ways, but you don't just lose the ball that much and then just stand there. And it was
the standing there. It was the standing there for me. I can be very apologetic about losing things in the lights. You're a professional athlete, but sometimes that's going to happen. It happened to Christian Arroyo the week before. Mm-hmm. But listen, man, run.
Just
turn around and run.
At least look. He didn't even turn around.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, I would have been like, nope, that's not part of it. Have fun back down in the minors. See you later.
That was not that far of a drive. Yeah.
That was crazy to me.
No other words can be said there.
Not for this podcast, at least. No words can be said.
Yeah. We got to go to another network.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, fine. Kevin, let's move to the West Coast here. Mike Trout, who's on the IL, he got a cortisone shot in his back. He won't be ready to return from the IL on Monday, which he could have been. Is there anything in the Angels outfield worth taking advantage of with Trout continuing to be sidelined?
No, there really isn't. Marsh is going to play center field, and we're going to see more Joe Adell. Hopefully, like we see what we've been expecting for a couple of years out of him, but there's nothing immediately actionable here. I really don't think so. On the flip side, completely off the subject, just to get on the good side of our guest, the Orioles did just take the lead over the Yankees.
Did they?
Yeah, they just
scored 4-3.
They just scored 2 in the 7th. Now we're cruising again with Alex here.
There you go.
So I tried to check after the Carpenter home run to see what had changed, but my headphones joined my phone and I lost all audio. So I panicked and turned my phone off, and now I'm scared to check anything. So that's a delightful update. Thank you very much. Who did it? Do you know how they did it? Do you know who was it? A 2-run home run? Was it a couple singles?
It was not a home run. Couple of driven. Mullins was part of it. I have it right here.
Mullins and Mancini
had a sac fly.
Okay.
And prior to that, Mateo drove in Ramon Urias, who has been one of my favorite ads in all kinds of leagues recently. I've talked way too much about Ramon Urias, and he's still underappreciated and under-rostered everywhere.
It's almost as if that happened for a reason, because if we scroll down in the notes and look at my player recommendations, people listening are about to hear 2 very familiar names, and I'm going to look very good. But let it be noted, they were put on before the Orioles took the lead.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for the aside there. But Alex, we'll get right back into your last news item. Former 4th overall pick, JJ Bleday, he is joining the Marlins. It was expected, and then the Marlins threw out a tweet with number 67 on there, making it official, even though he hasn't officially been added to the roster yet. He will be joining the team in Pittsburgh as Jorge Soler goes back on the IL. Though Bleday won't be available to be picked up in NFBC leagues, as he won't make his debut until Sunday at the earliest. He could be someone that we watch throughout the upcoming week to see what we might be bidding on him next Sunday. But what are your expectations for Bleday as a top 4 pick in the draft, as far as playing time and overall production goes in Miami?
I am not interested, really. He's got so much good power. He's hit 20 home runs this year in 2022 down in the minor leagues, all in AAA so far, but he's also hitting .228 and striking out 27% of the time. And I'll tell you what, JJ, it doesn't get easier when you come to the big leagues. And that's what kind of scares me a little bit. I wouldn't be necessarily rushing to run out and get him. Like, when I see that profile, you obviously drool a little bit when you see 20 home runs and you see the theoretical 50 game power and 55 raw power. But like, when it comes with that many Ks, and he's going to be seeing the velocity that he's going to be seeing. He could theoretically be seeing Jacob deGrom in a week and a half. I don't know when the Marlins are going to play the Mets, but he's going to be seeing elite pitching. He's going to be seeing elite breaking pitches. Maybe if I could get him for cheap, but that just doesn't happen in NFBC. You have a prospect with some sheen who's got some home run potential. I wonder if guys are going to, I don't know if they're going to break the bank for him, but they're probably going to spend a good amount of money. But for me, I would probably chill out a little bit, wait that one out.
Yeah, I think you can get some guys on the cheap this time of year just because budgets have been chipped away throughout the first couple months of the season. And teams are saving their money for what they really need. So if Blade had come up, I think, in May, we'd see a much higher bids on him for various reasons. One, more teams could theoretically have used him, and you'd have more opportunity for him to add stats throughout the course of the season, and budgets are bigger. But right now, I think you'll see plenty of $1 bids on Blade just because teams are like, that's not where I need to spend my money right now. Yeah, he's going to go in majority of leagues. He'll go in the anywhere between the $15 to $50 range probably. And you'll see a couple of triple digit bids in there just for the name recognition and fourth overall draft pick, top prospect, yada, yada. But I think we'll see on Monday that I think a majority of that, I think that average winning bid, especially in 12 teamers, is going to be very low. In the 15 teamers, you could still be in like the less than $25 range. All right, Kevin, we'll end it here with our Royals note of the episode. Nick Pratto, he was brought back to the Royals, making his Kansas City debut on Friday. And unfortunately, that also meant that Edward Olivares is the one who made room for him by leaving the team this time, not being sent down. He just hit the IL with the left quad strain. But are you expecting Pratto to be with the team longer this time, or is this just like a stopgap until Olivares is back?
Like so much going on right now, it really depends on what happens over the next 10 days. It really is disappointing. The Royals were finally starting to play Edward Olivares like we all hoped they would all of last season, and then he gets injured. And then Nick Pratto comes up, and awesome, 2 doubles in his home debut in Kansas City last night, 0 for 4 today as we're recording, but he's got very small sample, and going 0 for 4, he's still hitting 273. So he's come out of the gate, had his home run last week and a couple of doubles again last night. It would be nice to see him in there, but it's just so hard to tell with a team like Kansas City, who we expect several players to be on the move, but we've expected that for several years from Kansas City and haven't seen it. We've gone through these trade deadlines with Whit Merrifield, Michael A. Taylor. They haven't had Benintendi until recently, but all these guys rumored to be on the move, and in the past, they haven't ended up going anywhere. And I know we don't know what they're being offered. I'm not one of the people that gets irate because I can't believe we didn't trade Whit Merrifield when he was so valuable. We don't even know what people were offering for Whit Merrifield. So I don't get in that mode. But historically speaking, the Royals haven't moved a lot of position players over the years. They have moved guys on the pitching side, but not as many position players. So it's going to be interesting to see if they don't move anybody when Olivares comes back. Pratto could very well be sent back down, no matter how well he's performing. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to move some guys. I think he's going to be up. I think he's going to play a majority of games the rest of the season for Kansas City. And if so, we got so excited about Vinny Pasquantino, and rightfully, Nick Pratto has just as good, if not better, plate discipline. He's got the power numbers. Nick Pratto can be what everybody's expecting Vinny Pasquantino to be, and cost us a lot less as far as FAAB goes. So I think he's worth a shot if he's available in your league. I think it's worth taking a chance and seeing what happens over the next 10 days.
I just feel for Royals fans. I do. I just know
coming from the Orioles fan.
It is because I sympathize with it, and it's mostly from a pitching perspective, because I feel like there have been so many pitchers that I've gotten so excited about in that organization that have never panned out. And I remember Jacob Junis and getting really excited about him. They still have plenty of guys in Brady Singer and Daniel Lynch who have a lot of upside there, but I know this is a sidebar. I just feel bad because I don't see any of them reaching their potential in that organization. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they just don't develop. I don't know if they have the pitching coaches. I don't know if they're analytical or not. Doesn't seem like they are. But we're talking about guys that have had so much upside that have never panned out. So yeah, I feel for them.
I know what it is. Well, I try to stay optimistic about things, but it's their pitching coach at the major league level. It's Kyle Eldred. I'll call him out. He gets called out every day by other people on Twitter. These guys go back down to AAA and dominate. And it's not just that their stuff plays better at AAA. They pitch different at AAA. They come back up. Kyle Eldred is still a pound the bottom of the zone guy. He hasn't made the types of adjustments that most teams have made with their pitching staffs. And so these guys come back up and they struggle. Kansas City made their move with the hitting side of this a couple of months ago, and they've been so much better hitting team. Not everybody realizes it. They're not winning a lot of games, but they have been. I think this is coming. I think they're trying to save face and not do it until the off season, but this change is going to come. On the flip side, Alex, this is why I get so excited for Orioles fans, Miami Marlins fans, even these fans of other teams, because I went through this in 2014 and 2015, and it is so much fun.
It's fun, man. Hey, let's just ignore our little Red Sox fan over here and talk about how fun it is to be a fan of an organization that sucks. Because it really is, because it makes the highs so much more high. Like, it's so funny because people are like, oh, you're an Orioles fan. I pity you. I pity Yankees fans because they have an expectation all day, every day that they're going to win. And as a result, it almost loses the sheen. Like, it just, the excitement sometimes just doesn't seem like it's there because after every Yankees game, there's just this expectation of like dominance. And I get that, and maybe it is just me as a kind of a loser Orioles fan, but now it just feels better. I don't know if I'm ready to say I'm happy for Royals fans because the ALCS where you swept us still like hurts so bad. Like it hurts so bad, but I will say that I'm very happy that you won a World Series. I guess I'll say that.
Appreciate it. No, you're so right. So how long has it been now since the day the Yankees signed Garrett Cole that all we saw was how many World Series do we win now? And so far it's still 0.
Still a big 0. Still a big goose egg.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the news and notes. And for the record, I'm not that young. I lived through plenty of bad Red Sox seasons. Okay.
Boo him. Boo.
He's saying boo earns.
I'm saying boo earns. I love your Dunedin shirt, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for pronouncing it correctly, too.
My wife was from down the road there, actually.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
I lived there for 9 months.
Get out of here. It's the best dad joke ever. Are you hungry or are you done eating? Great. Good stuff.
All right. That's going to wrap it up for our news and notes section of the episode. As always, I'm sure we missed a bunch of stuff worth noting that may or may not affect your FAAB betting. But to keep up with all the news of the day, make sure you're listening to the First Pitch podcast with Chad Young, Scott Chu, Daniel Port, and Kevin Hasting, which when they break down the news highlights and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league. Just a moment, we're going to talk to Alex about some surprises he's noticed so far in the 2022 season. Before we do that, we're going to take this quick break.
Hey, Alex Fast here, and thanks for listening to this podcast on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. If you're a fan, consider supporting all of us by getting a PL Plus subscription, where you're going to get an ad-free website and get access to our Discord, where you can talk to all of our podcast hosts and staff. Plus, you can hang out with our incredible Pitcher List community. It's basically a baseball sanctuary year-round for as low as $8 a month. You can sign up at pitcherlist.com/plus, and you're going to get your first month free with promo code podcast. Also, don't forget to check out everything else we do as well, from YouTube videos, live streams, newsletters, off-season articles, TikToks, breakdowns, over 15 baseball podcasts on our network. We can't stop talking about baseball even during the off-season. So sign up for PL Plus today at pitcherlist.com/plus and use promo code podcast to get your first month free. All right. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
And surprise, we are back. You, of course, are listening to On the Wire. I am Adam Howe, joined, of course, by my co-host Kevin Hasting and today's special guest, Alex Fast. We are going to very quickly talk to Alex about some pitching surprises he's noticed this year. So, Alex, I'm just bluntly, like, who out there this year so far in the season is just barely halfway through? And as I mentioned, I think last week, like, this is one of the very few times I've noticed that the actual mathematical halfway point has been so close to the All-Star game. Usually I feel like the All-Star game is like weeks after sometimes, or weeks before, and those halfway marks don't add up. But this one's been pretty close, so I feel comfortable saying the halfway mark. On the pitching side of things, is there any guys that have just really, it could be a prospect that you just didn't think you didn't have on your radar, and all of a sudden he's just blowing it up, or somebody you thought should have made that big jump and has just been struggling? Could be positive, could be negative. Give us a couple guys that like just really stood out to you this year, and then why we probably should have seen it coming.
Yeah, so the first one that I don't know if we should have seen it coming. Maybe we should have theoretically seen it coming. But the first one that you have to mention as one of the biggest surprises is Martin Perez, right? Having a 2.68 ERA through 111 innings over the course of the year is incredibly impressive for him. I don't know if necessarily that's going to last, and I don't think it has in his more recent starts, but that's definitely been one of the more impressive. While this is a good example of one that we like is a good surprise as to how well he's been performing, but isn't too much of a surprise and something that we could have theoretically seen coming, and that's Tony Gonsolin, right? We had a lot of great expectations for Tony Gonsolin in the shortened 2020 season when he ended up having a 2.31 ERA with a 14% swinging strike rate, and we got really excited about that. And then 2021 came, and the ERA was fine at 3.23. He didn't end up throwing a lot of innings. He only ended up throwing about 55, but the FIP was a concern, and he just didn't really look as dominant as what we would have expected to see. We already had the issue where Tony Gonsolin was going to be the fifth starter every once in a while. He was going to get Dodgeritis. He was going to be coming in relief, and I think a lot of people, myself included, were like, okay, maybe he's one of those Dodger prospects that doesn't necessarily pan out. Dustin May was getting a lot of love at the time before he went down with the Tommy John. It was like we weren't necessarily paying as much attention to Tony Gonsolin, and then, of course, what happens? He has one of the best ERAs in baseball. He's probably going to end the year with about 140 innings. All the pitches that we thought would be good are good, if not elite. The splitter has a 107 batting average against right now. WRC Plus is always kind of like a fun, quick summary of how a pitch is doing. Usually the higher it is for WRC Plus, the worse it is. Tony Gonsolin has a -8 WRC Plus on his splitter right now, and that is absolutely insane. One that is not so much though, because you could say, of course, Tony Gonsolin is going to be good. He's a Dodger. I never doubted it for a second. Is Tarik Skubal. A little bit bold to be saying this now because Tarik Skubal, obviously coming into the All-Star break, struggled a lot. He returned super well in that start against Oakland, going 6 innings pitched with 2 walks and 9 Ks, with no earned runs and just 2 hits in that entire start. Even with the struggles that he's had, he still has a 2.92 FIP, which is like top 15 amongst all starters so far this year. He's made strides. He has so many plus pitches, and I still think he's theoretically trying to figure it out. I don't know if we've even really seen the best of him yet. Like, I think theoretically he can put together a really good low 3 ERA season that he's going to support over the course of an entire year. I just think between that slider that he has, the fastballs I think there could theoretically be some improvement with the fastball, especially that 4-seamer. It's still getting hit a little bit too hard, although the sinker's got a lot of plus there. The curveball, though, is just a pitch that he hasn't really been able to utilize as much as I wanted him to, which just means that he could theoretically take a step forward there. So yeah, my 3 guys, Martin Perez, Tony Gonsolin, and Tarik Skubal.
See, this is why we do the focus topics with our guests, especially guys like Alex. It's like, all right, here's the mic, Alex, just talk about the thing that you love to talk about. And I could have walked away. I could have gotten a drink and it would have been perfectly fine. I didn't. I stayed here. I listened to everything.
You did. Yeah. Kudos. Nick often does.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, before I go back to Alex about what could be what he thinks he might be surprised back in the second half. Is there a player that you've noticed that's like really thrown you off guard in this first half, whether it's pitching or hitting, doesn't matter. Hopefully it's not one of the three that Alex just talked about, or if it is, that's fine. And I'm curious to know if it's so much of a surprise that you like have zero exposure to them in any of your leagues.
Yeah, actually. And once again, it's the type of player that we don't get to talk about much on this show because we're usually talking guys available on the waiver wire, but I didn't expect Mookie Betts to have 345 plate appearances right now. Mm-hmm. I was concerned with his injury history and the way last season went, and the fact that he's at 345 plate appearances doing what he's doing, and I have zero in like 25 leagues is pretty disheartening. But it's surprising all the same. And like I said earlier with some of the other players we were talking about, it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch a healthy Mookie Betts. I just wish I had him on some of my teams.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we all have at least one of those players where you're like, I shouldn't have been as out as I was, or obviously it's easy to say that, hindsight 2020 and all that. All right, Alex, give me like one or two pitchers that you're hoping or expecting will be surprised at their second half performances. Again, positive or negative.
I'm going to stick with the positive because we like to stick with the positive. This is a guy who we've been talking about for a long time. His season has not been great in terms of raw numbers, but did just get a 5-year extension today, which means that the Brewers are very into him, and so am I, and that is Aaron Ashby. There's been a little tomfoolery recently with how they've been utilizing him. They gave him a weird opener thing to get in his bullpen before the All-Star break. Coming into the year right now, he has 69 innings pitched. So he should be able to theoretically have the leash taken off of him. He had some injuries. He was coming in relief. I think he could be a real nice step forward for the Brewers for the rest of the way. And I would be surprised if they wouldn't just let him throw, especially because as it gets to the playoffs, which they are theoretically going to make the playoffs, they don't really need him to be a starter. They can have him be a little bit more of a swingman and don't need to worry about the innings as much. So I think he's going to be a fun guy to pay attention to. The other one is a guy that, I was very excited about him coming into the offseason, and then he got injured in his first inning of his first start and then just finally reappeared before the All-Star break, and that's Luis Patino's got very good stuff. That slider was really great for him last year. It had a 14.2% swinging strike rate, an okay 2.78 WOBA. I really think he's still going to be able to put it together, and it wouldn't surprise me if it had a really good back end for Tampa, and they need that right now. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Luis Patino.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Of course, Ashby has 69 innings. This is also our 69th episode, so that works out very
perfect.
Nicely.
Meant to be.
Works out nicely.
There it is. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's jump right into those recommendations so Alex can get a couple players off his chest that he alluded to earlier. As we tend to do, we'll go category by category or groupings of categories, and we will start in the normal order, going with our power category. Kevin, we're going to make Alex sweat a little bit and let you go first here. Who might be hitting a couple bombs for us this week?
I like Austin Slater out in San Francisco. This is kind of interesting to me. Everything I look at and all the different leagues I'm in and all the different formats I'm in, and I pull up players that are available and weekly projections for the past couple of weeks, Austin Slater kept coming up and I wasn't very interested. He's 75% rostered in 15-team FBC leagues, main events anyway, but only 11% in the 12-team online championships and 10% on Yahoo, very similar. So he's available in a lot of shallow leagues, and we know San Francisco likes to play the matchups, and historically Austin Slater has been much better versus lefties. San Francisco is set to face at least 3 lefty starters this week with one day up in the air. So close to half the week, about as good as we're going to get for teams facing lefties. And so I'm finally buying in on what projections have been telling me for the past 2, 3, 4 weeks about Austin Slater. And I like him for this coming week.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'm going to look like a genius, like I said, but I'm going to go with Ramon Urias. Since he's come back from the IL, he's slashing 372, 413, 628. He's got 3 home runs, 14 ribbies. He's batting low enough that he's going to be able to pick up a few of those ribbies. He goes to Tampa, which isn't great. He's going to get Shane McClanahan, which kind of stinks, but I still think he could run into a few home runs. But then he goes to Cincy, for the end of the week. So hitting in Cincinnati, he's been on fire. I think he could be, and he's rosterable everywhere right now. So I think he could be a fun addition and steal you a few home runs this week.
Nice.
I love Ramon Urias. I've been talking about him since before he got injured. It all goes to Alexander Chase's hard contact rate instead of hard hit rate. I've been buying into that ever since he started talking about it. Ramon Urias has been one of those guys that I thought, okay, better things are coming than what we've seen. And right before his injury, he had a couple of monster home runs, one way out over that extended fence in Baltimore we've heard so much about, that it's making home runs impossible to left field. He blew one past it, the other way over the deepest part at Fenway. And I love Ramon Urias right now.
All right, well, let's let Alex segue right into our speed category then. Who do you like to steal a couple bags, maybe score some runs?
I just don't understand how Jorge Mateo isn't more owned. All right, yeah, never mind. I guess I do, because he's hitting 206. So I answered my own question there. But if you got to be joking me right now. You got to be joking me right now. Who do you think just hit a home run for Baltimore?
Oh,
is it Ramon Urias?
is it Urias?
You bet your butt it is.
You bet your
He
Urias.
So I feel like a golden god right now. This is unbelievable. He just hit a 2-run home run off Shane Green to make it 6-3, 416 feet to dead center. Come on. You can't write that. That's unbelievable. It literally happened 2 seconds ago. Anyway, Jorge Mateo, he's got 22 stolen bases. If you can stomach the 206 average, which theoretically you might be able to, he's continued to steal. He's slowed down a little bit, but still, if he's on base, he is a chance. He is a threat to steal. That's obviously been something that we've seen over the course of the full season. So if you need stolen bases and you're crushing it in average, if you're in a weekly league, or even if you're doing super well in a roto and you really need to catch up a little bit, yes, he's going to be hitting at the bottom of the order each time. But that also means that he's going to score a few runs when he gets on base, with Mullins, Rutschman, and Mancini hitting right behind him. Yeah, I think if you need stolen bases, the fact that he's that available is crazy to me. Pick him up.
Yeah, definitely more available, though, in the Yahoo, CBS's, ESPNs of the world. 100% rostered in the main event, 97% rostered in the NFBC Online Championship. So even those common 15 and 12 teamers, not only is he rostered, the teams that are rostering him are stomaching that 206 average at a 70% clip. So 70% of the rosters that he's rostered on, he's in the starting lineup. There's obviously value that can be seen. And there's been plenty of jokes on Twitter about pretty much Jorge Mateo can do no wrong. He had an RBI hit by pitch earlier this season. He can do it all. He can do it all, folks. All right, Kevin, who might be available in your leagues that could score some runs for you?
Yeah, even in 15-team leagues, Gene Segura started to get snatched up last week in main event leagues, but he's still available in over 25% of them. He's rostered in 72% on main event. And then in online championship, 12-team leagues, it drops all the way to 17% rostered. He plans to start a rehab assignment this coming week. Then it looks as though he will not, or he's not shooting for returning to the Phillies until late the following weekend. But then we're still talking about 8 weeks of the season left. This is the last week to get him inexpensively anywhere, and he won't be inexpensive everywhere. In fact, he will be quite expensive in some spots, I'm sure. But he's a guy definitely to have a bid on, because in a couple of weeks, we'll have Gene Segura back. And we know what he was doing early this season, especially if you had him on a roster. You know what it cost you when you lost him. I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah, because you sound as though you've experienced this.
It sounds personal.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's move into some opportunity players. Before I do that, let's go over some schedule notes. A good chunk of the league has a 7-game work week this coming play period. Baltimore, Boston, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, Houston, the Angels, Seattle, Texas, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Colorado, the Dodgers, and the Giants all play 7 games without an off day. There are no scheduled doubleheaders, so everybody who's playing 7 games has a game every single day. There are 4 teams, however, that have only 5 games this week, and that is St. Louis, the Mets, Minnesota, and the White Sox. Minnesota just all the off days. They only had 2 games this week and 2 off days next week. Plenty of rest for their bullpens and everybody else for that matter. Colorado, as they tend to do, have a good majority of their games all in one place. They'll be back home for 6 of their 7 games. They do finish up their wraparound series on Monday on the road, but then they will be hosting the White Sox for 2 and then the Dodgers for 4 Thursday through Sunday. So with all that in mind and anything else you guys want to consider, Kevin, I'll start with you. Who are you liking based on the matchups, based on the opportunity that they have ahead of them for this coming week?
I just want to touch on Colorado really quickly. We talked about this, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I put an article out a couple of days ago on Pitcher List about not starting your Rockies when they play on the road and how the schedule has actually worked to our benefit, even in weekly lineup leagues. It's time to trade your Colorado players this week. There's 10 full weeks left in the season. 4 of those weeks, they play all of their games at home. And I'm counting this week in that, where 6 games are at home in spite of the game at Milwaukee on Monday. So this week, get them in your lineup. And then they're only going to be at home for 3 full weeks the rest of the season. So trade them this week after they're in your lineup to start the week. As far as a player I like for his opportunity this week, we've talked about the Marlins a little bit, and then I briefly alluded to him earlier. Yeah, John Birdie may be back soon. Yeah, J.J. Bleday is coming up, but Joey Wendell has been the leadoff hitter for a week now, and he is hitting in every game, and he's got multi-hits in most games all until today. He kind of came back to reality a little bit so far on Saturday, but Joey Wendell has been very productive over the past week or so when he's been forced into that leadoff role for the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, circling back to a topic that you hit on earlier, which is that the Royals are hitting. They're hitting super well, and Hunter Dozier is available in a lot of leagues, and he's got the perfect positional eligibility at first, third, and outfield, because I just love that you can plug him in both in and out. He's been crushing it in July, slashing 349, 376, 28. Yeah, the OBP isn't as good as that average, but it's tough to keep up with a 349 average. But yeah, he's got some power. He's hitting cleanup for them, available. So yeah, I think he'd be a good pickup for a lot of people right now.
And who knows what his role will be in 10 days, as Kevin alluded to earlier, but we'll see. I mean, it's worth holding on to him now and figuring out after the dust settles. All right, let's hit into our pitching categories, guys. We will look further ahead than just next week with our future 2-start section. You guys got a list of pitchers in front of you that, as of right now, could see themselves with a 2-start week. Not this week, but the first week of August. So, Alex, I'll start with you here. Of the guys on this list, again, this list is only made up of pitchers who are rostered in 50% or less of Yahoo leagues as of today. So obviously Yahoo leagues change on the daily. Most of those are daily pickup leagues. So there can be a lot of flipping and flopping and streaming and what have you. But as of right now, you guys have about 10 pitchers to choose from. Give me a guy or 2 here that you like based on the matchup, based on the talent, based on whatever you want. And then also throw in a guy in here that you think the field is that you're probably just fading.
Ooh, that's a tough one. The schedule makes this a little bit of an easier decision in my mind. I wonder if the field might be interested in Spencer Howard because he still has that sheen. And theoretically at Seattle and Baltimore isn't the most difficult, even though Seattle's still riding high and winning games left and right. I'm probably going to go with Cal Quantrill, as much as it pains me to say. You're not going to be able to get a good amount of strikeouts from him, but you're going to probably get good ratios from him. Boston, I'm not really. Devers out could be a ripe opportunity to get a win, to keep that ratios down, and then he ends up getting Arizona after that. So he definitely has the best 2 starts. Braxton Garrett, interesting as well, but at Cincinnati can be a little bit tough. So I'm going to go with Cal Quantrill, or am I totally crazy and he's actually going Arizona, Houston?
Yeah, when he gets his 2 starts, he'll have Arizona, Houston in his 2 start. He gets Boston next week. For this coming week.
So with that said, you know what? I'll stick with it because I'm going to let, just in case we have some Royals on the up and up, I'll stick with it.
All right, Kevin, same question then. Who do you like? Who are you fading mostly based, as Alex said, you really have to go by matchups. Especially
it's all matchups for me, for sure. And Alex touched on it. Braxton Garrett came through for us this week. Those of us that thought he'd have a second consecutive nice outing against Pittsburgh, he did. Don't like him at Cincinnati this week, but then the following week he gets Cincinnati back in Miami. And then at the Cubs, this is a tough time of year. We don't know that far ahead what the weather and wind most specifically will be doing in Chicago. But Braxton Garrett's been really good recently. If I was in a really tough bind, I may even use him this week at Cincinnati. Don't want to if I don't have to, but I definitely that matchup the following week when he gets Cincinnati back in Miami. And I'm willing to take the risk on that Cubs matchup to get that Cincinnati matchup. Another one Michael Pineda has always been one of my favorites, and I don't know if anybody else would be in on Pineda, but Minnesota's lineup, I think, is a lot better than people realize right now, and I'd be avoiding that matchup in a couple weeks. Obviously, we're not using them in Toronto after what we saw them do yesterday, in spite of falling flat today. I don't think we'll be using too many guys in Toronto in the near future till we see quite a few single-digit games at least, let alone games not in their 20s. But, yeah, Pineda's a guy typically that I think's a little better than a lot of people realize in certain situations, but I'm not using him against Minnesota.
I really thought that there was a chance, since one Boston-based team came back from a 27-3 deficit to win, that the Red Sox could do it too. They scored a run, and then they got
So close.
All right, let's move into this coming week. We got wins and Ks, our counting categories for pitchers. Kevin, I'm gonna start with you here. Let's stick with the Boston favoritism here, and who are you looking at?
Yeah, Cutter Crawford. He's been pretty decent so far. Definitely like the matchup this week. And I just like where Boston is at, and where, in spite of what it ended up being, 28-5.
Hey, a win and a loss are the same no matter what the score is.
Exactly. That's what we're getting at here. And Cutter Crawford, 4 of his last outings have been starts. 3 of those 4 have been good. And I like the strikeouts. Who doesn't like 44 strikeouts in 36 innings? And Cutter Crawford is one of these guys. Usually in this area, I'm looking for a guy with a couple of nice starts, but I went through the pitching matchups for the week pretty thoroughly this week. I usually do, but even more thoroughly than usual. I have a couple of teams where just like 1 or 2 starting pitchers could really put me over the top. And we got 10 weeks to go, basically 10 full weeks. So I was really looking at this, and Cutter Crawford getting Cleveland on Thursday. Cleveland has its ups and downs. Josh Naylor has been great, especially when he plays the White Sox. Luckily, this is the Red Sox we're talking about. So, yeah, as many question marks as there may be, everything I'm looking at, I like Cutter Crawford this week.
That's a good call. Yeah, I take that one for sure. I think I have 2. One is Jake Odorizzi. He's going against Oakland, and then Seattle. He's been very good. The only thing that concerns me is this is his 3rd consecutive time facing Oakland, but he did have the All-Star break in between, so I don't know if that nullifies things when you have a 2-week break between the two. The other, Jacob Junis has an interesting 2-start week with Arizona and then the Cubs. I don't know necessarily how deep into a game he could theoretically go. We've seen him go 5 or 6 a few times. There could be some nice upside there, and with the weak teams that he's facing, Junis could be a fun play.
To go back to Crawford real quick, it has been nice that we've seen him go at least 5, if not 6 innings in his last 3 starts, including the start he made today where he went a full 6. Only struck out 4, but it is nice to see him getting stretched out quite a bit by Cora. All right, the ratio categories are next. Those are ever important throughout now, and no matter what you think, it's never too late in the season to try to chip away at those. And also keep in mind that these are the categories in which other teams can come back to you as well. So it's a double-edged sword there. Kevin, who might be chipping away at your ratios this coming week?
Yeah, typically when we talk about this category, lots of times I bring up the same guys over and over again throughout the season, or I just say that there's a lot of this type of guy out there, and there is, but it's amazing to me that as much as we pay attention to when we're doing this, things can still get biased, and we don't even realize what's going on. And I was looking at a box score after the game yesterday, and I'm like, who's this Lee guy for Atlanta? Is Cliff Lee back, or what's going on? This guy's got like 26 appearances this season, and I hadn't heard of him. And best of all is 3 of his last 4 were multi-inning, which is what we're looking for when we're looking at this category, helping out our ratios. He's got a 1.44 ERA on the season and 25 innings pitched, right at a strikeout and inning guy. And the ratios are amazing. And lately, Atlanta has been using him in a multi-inning role. So he's a perfect guy for this category.
Yeah, I saw his name on the rundown. I had to do the same thing. I had to do a quick little search. So I appreciate that call out there. Alex, who might be chipping away some ratios for you this week?
Andres Munoz over in Seattle has just been absolutely crushing it right now. He's got a pretty much a 21% swinging strike rate, which is almost unfathomable, and a 40% K rate. He's also got a 6.3% walk rate, which isn't elite, but not bad. It's pretty okay. Not usually he's a guy who's just been absolutely crushing it. He's been put into high leverage situations for Seattle. Obviously, the team's been winning some games. I think he's a real nice pick to pick up right now to keep your ratios down for the next week.
Yes, still available in the main event. I think we talked about him last week or the week before, Kevin, but 83% rostered in the main event, only 16% rostered across online championships. So those 12 teamers readily available. 2 really good names to keep, at the very least, to keep in your waterfall bids, in your contingency bids. If you don't get the guy you really want, these guys are going to do more help than harm for sure, especially in those ratios. All right, everybody's favorite pitching category. Of course, I will start with Alex, who literally tried to write the book on how to draft saves in a prior life. Alex, who might you be taking a shot on for either a vulture save or a future save opportunity? We are getting closer and closer to the trade deadline. I know that is that's everybody's favorite thing to do right now, is stash the guy you think is going to walk into a role. So who do you got?
Even though I don't think the Orioles are going to end up moving Jorge Lopez, Felix Bautista is one of the best relievers in baseball right now. He's simply unbelievable. In Baltimore, 99, 100, 101 mile an hour four-seamers with 91 mile an hour splitters. He's been featured prominently on Pitching Ninja the past 2 days, featured prominently as well again tonight as he struck out the side last night, struck out 2 Yankees again tonight. Honestly, some of the best stuff in baseball, even if it's difficult to say if he's going to get a vulture save, because I think he's more the fireman role. I think he's going to be able to, he jumps in a little bit before Jorge Lopez comes into the game. But if Jorge Lopez ends up getting another save or 2, or if he does end up getting traded, Felix Bautista has just been absolutely fantastic. So I'll go with him.
All right, Kevin, who might you be stashing for some saves, whether it's for this week or after the trade deadline?
Like Alex mentioned, this time of year, we start speculating who's going to be moved. And it seems I've only brought this guy up a couple of times this season, but then I remember saying that more than once. Like, we've brought this guy up a couple of times this season. Scott Barlow is the most valuable trade piece the Royals have. With all the talk about Benintendi and all the talk about Whit Merrifield and Michael A. Taylor for their defense, and the most valuable trade piece they have is Scott Barlow, and he's going to be gone. And as much as I've loved Josh Dalmont in the past, and I think he could still be an okay reliever, he doesn't have the velocity that he had the last couple of seasons. He's down, he's throwing 95, 96 miles an hour, which his off-speed stuff isn't good enough for that to work as well. I don't think. Like, when he's throwing triple digits after those secondary pitches, that means something. When he's throwing 95, 96, he hasn't been as good. So Dylan Coleman, I think, is going to be the guy in Kansas City. And Kansas City historically does this. When they're a bad team, they're going to play 500 or better baseball after the trade deadline. They do it year in, year out. that's what they're going to do. There's going to be save opportunities, and I think they're going to go to Dylan Coleman.
Now, I would say you've heard it here first, but as Kevin alluded to, you might have heard it here first. It just probably wasn't today. Dylan Coleman, good call out there. All right. Again, my favorite category to hear you guys come up with is our wild card category. Of course, this is our speculative ads. And yes, you can still make spec ads this late into the season, whether it be an IL stash or a prospect that you think might get the call up who might be available. Whatever it is, let's hear what you guys have to say. Kevin, start with you here. Who might be your wild card for this week?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit with Segura. He started getting picked up last week, coming back from the finger injury. And we have a couple of other guys with hand injuries, thumb and finger injuries, and Salvador Perez and Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper's not available anywhere. I was surprised. I'm not surprised at how heavily rostered he is. I'm surprised it's 100% across the board, including 96% on Yahoo, which, yeah, there's a lot of leagues on Yahoo with some weird things going on, and he's still 96% rostered. But Salvador Perez is available. He's even available in 30% of main event leagues, and we're looking at a possible August 20th return, which gives us 6.5 of the 10.5 weeks remaining. That's worth it if you have a spot, in my mind, at this point. If not this week, definitely next week. I think next week is when we will see more and more leagues begin to roster him. So if you really want to get ahead of the curve, it's so hard to carry a third catcher. But we're talking a stash anyway. Why does it matter what position it is if we're talking a stash? And we're talking about a guy that could come out and hit several home runs over the last 6 weeks of the season. So Salvador Perez, for me, if you're in, definitely check for Bryce Harper. We're looking about the same timeline. If everything's going well, we haven't heard anything about Bryce Harper since he said he intended to play again this season. That's been 3 or 4 weeks ago. We don't know how things are going, but we're getting to the point that if things are going well, if he's available in your league and if you have a spot, it's probably time to grab him.
Yeah, that goes to what we always say is like if you're keeping those spots on your roster, especially in the NFBC leagues where you don't have the IL slots, if you're being structured in your bench spots and you have those 1 or 2 stash spots, that is exactly what Kevin said. They're a stash spot. It doesn't matter what they are. You just value the guy you want to pick up to stash versus the guy you're already stashing anyway. Obviously, you can't just throw a bunch of stashes on your bench and take up all those spots and then have no flexibility. Stay structured in your bench spots. All right, Alex, who might you be throwing a dart at for any given reason for this FAAB period?
If Nick Lodolo is available, I think he still has plus stuff and his schedule gets much easier. Not only this week, he's got a 2-start week coming up against Miami and Baltimore, but then after that, I don't know, he might miss the Mets. They don't play the Cardinals nearly as frequently as they did in the first half. The speculative over the long term is DL Hall. I would keep refreshing Twitter. He went only 1 inning in his most recent start yesterday, and I still haven't found out why. I don't know if it was just a scare, but if it was a major injury, we probably would have heard about it by now. But before that start, he struck out 40 over his last 20 innings, 20 2/3. He's been unbelievable. He's fixed a lot of the command issues that have been plaguing him. If he's healthy or if it is a temporary thing, that's a guy who's probably coming up to Baltimore in August, September, and who should theoretically get a good amount of innings and could dominate.
Yeah, you'd think that Hall would have a spot, especially with Grayson Rodriguez obviously not going to make that call this year. I know I speculated that with Adley coming up, you start seeing these guys come up with him on the ready. Obviously, Gray Rod's not going to do that, but Hall could still do that, like you said, as long as he actually is healthy and nothing, knock on wood, happened in that last start. So I like that you finished it on an Oriole note, Alex. Well done. It was well scripted. But we will give Kevin the final word here. Kevin, any added words of wisdom for everybody out there as they head into I guess you could call it the stretch run at this point. We're halfway through or toward the end of July.
Yeah, it is. We have 10 full weeks of fantasy baseball and then a half week that we're not used to. That made me a lot of leagues really interesting, by the way, having the half a week in the first week of October where roto leagues are still in doubt. And I don't know how head-to-head leagues are going to handle that. Is that a 10 day week, the last week of the season? Are they scrubbing those last 3 days? I'm not in many head-to-head days, any head-to-head leagues to know how that's being handled, because the season doesn't end on Sunday this season. So that's going to be really interesting. But in general, we're to that point, 10 weeks. Now, that's 40% of the season. A lot can still happen. But like we talk about often, and more now than ever, we're looking at each category in roto leagues and be realistic without being pessimistic. If you've made improvements to your team, you can make up a lot of ground. If there are improvements you can make to your team, you can make up a lot of ground. But at the same time, you got to be realistic in some of these categories as well. If you're 30 home runs behind, not the person in front of you or the person in front of them, but in to catch 3 or 4 people, if you're talking you need 3 more home runs a week than a team that's already been kicking your butt all season long, that's probably not realistic. So we got to be realistic, but like I said, not pessimistic. If you've made a couple of ads and you're 20 behind and you'll jump 5 people, if you can get an extra 2 home runs a week, then that's what we're looking for. So you got to break things down by every single category and see where the wisest spot to play your resources are.
Yeah. And yes, Kevin, in those head-to-head leagues that play to the end of the season, typically it is the last 10 days is championship week. If you're like me and you fall in the camp of treat the final week of baseball the same way you treat week 17 of football season, you don't play that week and the championship ends in mid-September. But yes, I think we always talk about how we're looking at the team right above us, whether it's in an overall standings or if it's in your league standings. But at this point of the season, you're right. Like finding where you can make the most ground in any one particular category is so important. And so if you can jump one guy in home runs, but you might have a better shot at jumping 4 teams in runs, obviously, maybe we need to start thinking about stacking our lineups for some speed guys rather than focusing on the power.
Yeah. And if you have to get 20 more saves than the guys in front of you to jump 3 people, but you can pass 6 or 7 guys in strikeouts and wins by playing 9 starting pitchers or 7 starting pitchers and 2 middle relievers that have a better chance of getting wins than your half closers that you're playing, it's time to make that move.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode 69. Once again, I want to thank our guest, Alex Fast, for joining us this week. Alex, as if people don't know already, could you remind everybody where they can find you and what you do?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter over at AlexFast8. Got some nice graphics coming up on ESPN2 tomorrow night for the Joe Musgrove, Carlos Carrasco Sunday night baseball game. And then, of course, every Monday and On the Corner and every Tuesday at the Nick and Alex Baseball Show.
That's awesome. And of course, the On the Corner comes out on Tuesdays. You guys record that on Mondays, of course, so you can check.
Or you get it late night Monday sometimes.
Oh yeah, especially if you're in Kevin's shoes on the West Coast,
exactly.
Or even west of the West Coast. All right, like I said, that's going to wrap it up for episode 69 of On the Wire. Please make sure to subscribe, share, and review the podcast wherever you're listening. We will be back every Sunday throughout the season to give a detailed FAAB breakdown through the 2022 season. Of course, keep a lookout for Kevin's companion article over at pitcherlist.com that comes out Sunday afternoon as well. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is at Hasting Kevin. Of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like to once again thank our guest Alex Fast for joining us. Follow him at AlexFast8. I am Adam Howe, and on behalf of Kevin Hasting, thanks for listening. And with that, we bid you goodbye.